This time on unmute. Off to a great start. Thanks so much for having me, David. I'm really excited to be here today and sharing my product vision canvas with all of you. So, while I was living in Sydney a handful of years ago, I participated in an interactive session that was actually inspired by today's keynote speaker, Roman Pitchler. And it turned out that the artifact from our workshop proved to be really useful for our team and communicating with our stakeholders across the delivery of our project. So since then, I've drawn further inspiration from that workshop and other popular canvases, and I developed my own version of the product vision canvas. Each section in the template provides the prompts for a workshop that you can facilitate with your team. And when you're done, you'll have a clear product vision with supporting evidence that can be used with your team and stakeholders all the way from discovery through to delivery and growth. I really love this workshop because of how flexible it is. The same format and prompts can be adapted for upcoming feature development, a new product idea, or even a 3-year envisioning exercise. Your workshop can be run in person using a huge wall, washi tape, and some Post-it notes, or online using a virtual whiteboarding tool like we're doing, like I've done recently, especially during the pandemic. Your brainstorm starts with a problem statement. Then you can move on to target audience, their needs, and features that might solve those needs. Then look at your product's unique value proposition, how you'll measure success, what happy users might sound like, and then finish by coming up with experience principles and your product vision statement. Usually I like to block 4 or 6 hours so that the activity doesn't feel rushed. This provides plenty of time for working in small groups, discussing, sharing back, affinity mapping, and then coming to alignment. In a lot of companies that I've worked for, someone has come to me with an idea for a new feature or problem to solve like this one. Let's help our readers engage with news in a more transparent way. So today I'm going to use this example and show how you can use the product vision workshop to think through this request from a product thinking perspective. Start your workshop by defining the problem space. You'll want to agree on a single problem to solve before moving along to other prompts. For some teams, defining the problem is the most difficult part of the canvas, and my hypothesis is that many companies are used to spending time in the solution space, and therefore they're less comfortable exploring problems to solve. So if your team is struggling to clearly articulate the problem, you might want to run a separate session or conduct user research to explore your potential problem and opportunity spaces. A problem statement is not a solution phrased in another way, and you really need to resist the urge to start with a solution. For example, give people access to diverse content is a solution and not a problem. Stanford's D School says that a good problem statement provides focus and frames the problem, inspires your team, informs criteria for evaluating competing ideas, empowers your team to make independent decisions, and prevents you from creating concepts that end up being all things to all people. And from my experience, the more specific your problem statement, the better. Once your problem is defined, consider your audience. Who are we solving this problem for? The aim is to identify a single group or maximum 2 groups who will be using your product to solve the defined problem. These groups are typically different to segments or roles, but might align with your personas. And if you don't define the problem and your users up front, you risk building the wrong solution. Now, consider what those users need from your product. What are their pains or jobs to be done? I really like to encourage my teams to write on their stickies using I statements to build empathy with their users. Prompt number 4, features, is usually the most fun part of your workshop because it creates this wild flurry of stickies. I found that this prompt is the easiest for teams, especially when they're used to operating in more of a solutions mode. So what are some features or services that would solve your users' needs? And for all the product people in the room, and of course, this is a product conference, don't be afraid. Keep in mind that whatever is defined here doesn't need to translate one for one onto your roadmap. These features are just the starting point for prototyping and research that would typically be done as part of a discovery phase. Once you've identified features, the unique value proposition is next. Try to come up with maximum 2 or 3 UVPs, which will shape your future go-to-market plans. In brainstorming this section, ask your team, what makes your product special? How is your product better than what users are already doing? And why should they use your product, or why should they pay for it? Now, jump ahead to the future. What metrics should you track to know that your product or feature would be successful? What's the expected value for your user and for your business? And then look at success from another angle. What would happy users say about your product? Similar to the needs brainstorm, I really like to write these as quotes from the point of view of your user. Once the main prompts of the board are filled in, it's time to come up with your experience principles. Experience principles, sometimes called design principles, reflect your product's core values and priorities. And ideally, your experience principles would be based on research and should incorporate what the team has already learned about users' wants and needs. They should also reflect an understanding of the business needs and your brand's positioning. So, why do you need experience principles? Well, I found that they can help your teams align, make decisions, and focus. You can use your experience principles to support your decision making and reduce misunderstandings within your team and with your stakeholders. Following along with our news app idea, here are some example experience principles. Like the needs and quotes, I like to phrase these from the user's point of view to continue with that empathy building. I recommend coming up with 3 experience principles for your product because more than that is too hard to remember and will become overwhelming to use to make decisions within your team. And it's totally okay to start with one set of principles and then refine or adjust when more information is available, for example, following user research. And last, it's time for your product vision statement. A good product vision is both aspirational and actionable. It should describe the why behind your product and illustrate the value your product brings to your users. And alongside the experience principles, a clear product vision statement will help you and your team make decisions, focus, prioritize, and work towards your goals. You can, of course, use a templated approach for your product vision statement, but I usually advocate for something shorter and therefore easier to remember, like this one. Our vision is to burst filter bubbles with equal, unbiased access to news. A great vision statement can be recalled by every member of your extended team. And it's okay if your vision statement isn't perfect on the first try. Like the experience principles, the vision statement can be refined as your team begins to work on defining and delivering the product experience. All right, so imagine you ran this workshop. Like, what happens now? For me, I really like to create a digital one-pager of the canvas where I attempt to summarize and prioritize the ideas from the brainstorm. And you might be wondering, like, why a one-pager, especially if I'm creating a digital version that has plenty of space? And the reason is simple. It's really hard to get all of the ideas into a single page, even if you cheat and reduce the font size. But part of what makes this job fun is taking huge, big, complex ideas and simplifying them into a readable artifact that your entire team can use. I mean, right? When presenting this workshop, I'm always asked for an example of what the completed canvas should look like. So here it is. And I promise you that taking the time to create this one-page artifact is really worthwhile for you as the product manager. Streamlining the workshop content helps you to begin to form a point of view about your product, your problem space, potential solutions, and overall vision. After you've summarized your canvas, let it sit for a day or two and then reread it. Does it accurately reflect your discussion? Does it tell a story? And will it inspire your team? Once you're happy with where you've landed, share it with your team and your stakeholders and proactively ask for feedback. Your product vision canvas should become a living document and a reminder of what you're working towards and why. I'll leave you with one final tip for facilitating this workshop, and it's about timing. You could run the workshop as soon as a new idea comes up and then validate the assumptions in your canvas as part of discovery. Or you could come into the workshop with insights from product analytics and user research and then build the canvas around what you already know about your users. Personally, I like to run the workshop twice. First, after a new idea is presented, when there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And then I like to run it a second time after we've run more in-depth research to validate whether or not we were on the right track. Don't be afraid to refine your canvas as you continue with discovery and planning. And for me, as the work continues, I really love to refer to the canvas frequently, especially when it's time to make critical decisions or align with stakeholders. So thanks very much for listening to this lightning talk. I hope that these thoughts here have inspired you to facilitate the product vision workshop with your teams. And now I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, folks. So first of all, Merissa, thank you so much for the great lightning talk. I'm personally a big fan of canvases, and I really like this one in terms of seems like a great way to build that kind of shared understanding across your team. And I really like what you called it in terms of using it as a living document as well. So, so really, really handy tool there. So thank you for sharing. So, folks, we will open up for questions. So just pop them in the Q&A panel before we hand over to our second lightning talk speaker. So I see one or two just come in. Okay, so Merissa, how would you adapt this session if you're given a solution or a new feature idea instead of starting with a problem?
That's a great question. And I think that it's a challenge that so many of us face in our daily roles as product people. So usually what I try to do in that case is kind of work backwards. So if you start in the middle of the canvas with a bunch of features or solution ideas, what I try to do is sort of go backwards to then go forwards. So try to think about, okay, this solution, what kinds of problems might people be facing that this could be a solution for? And I just try to sort of take a step back so that we can take a step forward. I know that that can be really difficult, especially when sometimes you're working with executives or salespeople, or even really demanding customers who are like, I just want my feature built, build my feature. But I think that if you're really gentle in how you communicate, and if you explain to them that this working through the canvas will really help ensure that the solution is really the right one for a certain set of people, then I think that you'll be able to get the buy-in to facilitate this workshop and sort of go backwards to go forwards.
Absolutely, yeah. It does seem like a great tool to help get that type of alignment. So thank you for that question. Just another one come in. What are some other activities that pair well with this session?
Thanks very much for this question. And in the blog post that I wrote about the Canvas, I've linked to a ton of additional activities that you can use. For me, I really like to pair this with different types of things like a brainstorm around your problem space and your opportunity space for your business. I really like to pair with empathy maps so that you really have a clear understanding of your user and what kinds of pains or gains they might have. Things like that. I really like to use Simon Sinek's golden circle with like the why in the middle and the how and the what. I also like activities like trade-off sliders, especially if you're running this workshop as part of kind of an inception or kickoff week, so that you can also work with your stakeholders to understand, is time a priority? Is the perfect solution a priority? Is quality the priority? And things like that. And by using these kinds of extra activities, you end up with sort of like a whole day of interactive sessions with your team and your broader team so that you know that you're kicking off on the right track.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. So Merissa, we will let you go. Thank you so much again. We really appreciate it. It was cool to hear about this tool, and I'm sure lots of our community will find it useful. Is there anywhere people can find out more about you or contact you?
Yes, for sure. I am typically quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter these days. Also, feel free to find some of my articles on Medium.
Excellent. Thanks,
Thanks
Merissa.
for having me.
All right, see ya.